Harry Browne, who was the multiple-time Libertarian Party candidate for president. Do we have a picture of Harry Browne?
Oh yeah. Here.
Yeah, there he is. Oh,
Oh, that's
you know
is
what
that
that
actually
remind
him?
you know what that reminds me of, don't you? You know what he looks like? Yeah, yeah. He looks like that other guy. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
uncanny.
Yeah, that's Harry Browne. That's Harry Browne when he was younger,
Oh,
and that's Harry Browne
okay,
later
I
in
see.
life. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, so Harry Browne wrote this very famous essay, and he wrote it on September 12th, 2001. Now, obviously, that's a very important date. That was the day after the attacks of September 11th. Now, we could sit here and do this whole thing of, oh, where were you? Do you remember what you were doing? Do you remember seeing it on TV? Yada yada yada. But that's
Yeah.
we've done that for 21 years. We're gonna put
21 years.
we'll put a pin in that. But I think a more important question is do you remember what the mood was like in the media? Do you remember the speeches that were coming on TV the day after? Do you remember all the calls for action? Everyone's
Mm.
saying we have to find out who did this. The evildoers have to be brought to justice. Remember all that? I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
that. You remember seeing the night vision video of
Oh
like the
yeah.
tracers in Iraq and
For some
Afghanistan when
reason.
they're
Yeah.
they're yeah, yeah, right, when they're all the bombings and everything else. And I remember I was a sophomore in high school. I was a sophomore in high school the year that happened. And I remember all the kids in the hallways going like, "Yeah, we're going to go to war, USA, USA." And I remember thinking even then, that, guys, people are going to die.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean the bad guys, and I don't just mean the people that died the other day. I mean a bunch more people who like they're just getting the news right now like, "Hey, there was a bombing." Like now those some of those people are going to die too. A bunch of people that have no idea what's going on other than their world's about to come to an end is about to happen because of this. Because if the American empire knows one thing really well, it's collateral damage. And Harry Browne wrote this famous essay on September 12th, 2001. Here's a really, really quick forward, by the way, from Scott Horton. On September 11th, 2001, in the aftermath of the most deadly foreign attack on the United States since 1941, then recent Libertarian Party presidential candidate Harry Browne sat down and hammered out this single and honest take on the situation. He warned that our government had surely provoked the attack through their wanton violence in the Middle East, and that we should be careful not to overreact in a way that would compound our terrorism problem. If Browne had won the election of 2000, September 11th almost certainly would not have ever happened, since he would have already removed the U.S. military from Saudi Arabia and ended U.S. support for Israel's occupation of the Palestinians, the major motives of the attackers. If the attack had proceeded regardless, Browne's war on terrorism surely would have been over by Christmas 2001, and we would live in a very different and much better world today. So here's the essay. Is titled, When Will We Learn? September 12th, 2001. The terrorist attacks against America comprise a horrible tragedy, but they shouldn't be a surprise. It is well known that in war, the first casualty is truth, that during any war, truth is forsaken for propaganda. But sanity was a prior casualty. It was the loss of sanity that led to war in the first place. Our foreign policy has been insane for decades. It was only a matter of time until Americans would have to suffer personally for it. It is a terrible tragedy of life that the innocent so often have to suffer for the sins of the guilty. When will we learn that we can't allow our politicians to bully the world without someone eventually bullying back? President Bush has authorized continued bombing of innocent people in Iraq. President Clinton bombed innocent people in the Sudan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Serbia. President Bush the Sr. invaded Iraq and Panama. President Reagan bombed innocent people in Libya and invaded Grenada. And on it goes. Did we think the people who lost their families and friends and property and all that destruction would love America for what happened? When will we learn that violence always begets more violence? Teaching lessons. Supposedly, Reagan bombed Libya to teach Muammar al-Gaddafi a lesson about terrorism. But shortly thereafter, a Pan Am plane was destroyed over Scotland, and our government is convinced it was Libyans who did it. When will we learn that teaching someone a lesson never teaches anything but resentment? That it only inspires the recipient to greater acts of defiance? How many times on Tuesday did we hear someone describe the terrorist attacks as cowardly attacks? But as misguided and as despicable as they were anything but cowardly. The people who committed them knowingly gave their lives for whatever stupid beliefs they held. But what about the American presidents who order bombings of innocent people while the presidents remain completely insulated from any danger? What would you call their acts? When will we learn that forsaking truth and reason in the heat of battle almost always assures that we will lose the battle? Losing our last freedoms. And now, as sure as night follows day, we will be told we must give up more of our freedoms to avenge what never should have happened in the first place. When will we learn that it makes no sense to give up our freedoms in the name of freedom? What should we do? First of all, stop the hysteria. Stand back and ask how this could have happened. Ask how a prosperous country isolated by two oceans could have so embroiled itself in other people's business that someone would want to do us harm. Even sitting in the middle of Europe, Switzerland isn't beset by terrorist attacks because the Swiss mind their own business. Second, resolve that we won't let our leaders use this occasion to commit their own terrorist acts upon more innocent people, foreign and domestic, that will inspire more terrorist attacks in the future. Third, find a way with enforceable constitutional limits to prevent our leaders from ever again provoking this kind of anger against America. So what of patriotism? There are those who will say this article is unpatriotic and un-American, that this is not a time to question our country and our leaders. When will we learn that without freedom and sanity, there is no reason to be patriotic? Have the balls to publish that on September 12th, 2001.
Right.
I've been watching this show on Amazon Prime called The Terminal List. And it's this show, it's got Chris Pratt in it, and I don't want to like spoil a bunch of stuff for people that might watch the show, but Chris Pratt's like a Navy SEAL, and he gets caught up in some conspiracy stuff, and his family is murdered. And then he goes on a rampage, right? He's making his list of the people responsible that hurt him, that hurt his wife and daughter, and he's taking them out. And people love that kind of show, don't they? People love that kind of show. They hurt his family. They hurt his wife. They hurt his little girl. Revenge. Get him. There's even a scene in the show where he tells a reporter that's trying to blow up the story. He doesn't want the reporter to blow up the story because he says, these people aren't going to prison. Because what he means by that is he's not sending them to jail. He's sending them to the ground. Mm-hmm. People love that kind of story. That's what those people overseas think. They are the heroes of their own story. They're the protagonists. And it's the little black drone in the sky that shoots a missile into their daycare. And the people responsible for that, they're the bad guys that they don't want to send to prison. They want to put them in the ground. Funny how we can understand exactly how they feel because we go ooh-rah and cheer on our favorite character in the show when it happens to him because we identify with him. Now you know how they feel. Print that on September 12th, 2001. Could you imagine? So anyway, On that note, we're gonna wrap up the show here really quick. But before we do, I've actually got a clip here of Harry Browne. He died in 2006. I was believe he actually died here in Franklin, Tennessee, right north of
Oh,
right north of where I am. And he this is a clip of him on C-SPAN taking caller questions. And a caller calls in and asks him, now this is the year before September 11th, calls in and asks him how he would handle protecting our borders and national defense and foreign policy. I want you to take a listen.
The other thing, my last question is, how will we protect our borders from terrorist attack? If we decrease our tax bases and we don't have the necessary armed forces to handle.
I understand what you're saying. First, with regard to protecting our borders against terrorists, well, let me back up a little further. You said with regard to the armed forces, we're not saying that we should get rid of the armed forces. Obviously, we need that, and that's why government is instituted in the first place, to protect us from predators, foreign and domestic. The problem today is that we don't have much of a national defense. We can't protect this country against any two-bit dictator who gets his hands on a nuclear missile. What we do have is a giant national offense. We have the ability to annihilate any country in the world. We have troops in almost 100 countries of the world as though we were the occupying Roman army. We have bullied other countries into coming to Washington and agreeing to settlements that the President of the United States thinks is good for them. And of course, we've been bombing countries around the world. It's no wonder that terrorists are trying to attack our country. They don't like our foreign policy. They don't like the idea that we are running their countries, and they want to influence our foreign policy. And the only way they know how to do that is by blowing up the World Trade Center or whatever. If we would simply butt out of other countries' affairs, then other countries would be much less anxious to come over here and try to terrorize us.